Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at some multiplication and division of integers. So let's start at the very beginning. I can represent integer multiplication with models using integer counters. Or I know how to represent integer multiplication with models using integer counters. Alright, our very first section that we're going to look at says that we need to model -1 minus 2 using a number line. Okay, so really what this says is we've got a -1 minus the 2. So that's really like -1, but you're adding a -2. So it's really -3. So on your number line, you would start at 0 and you would go to the left 1, but then you would go 2 more and you would end up here at your -3. Okay, let's look at our next section. It says model -3 times 4. Okay, you're going to be multiplying a negative and a positive together, so you're going to end up with a negative number. One of the things that you can do is you can think about it like it's a little slice of pizza. There's a negative, and a positive. Okay, so if I were to multiply a negative and a negative, I would get a positive here. If I multiply a negative and a positive, I get a negative. So just kind of an easy way for you to remember what to do. Model -3 times 4. Okay, so I have a negative and a positive. So since I have a negative and a positive, I know I'm going to end up with a negative. So step 1. So you're going to count out the proper number of counters based on the first factor, also called the multiplicand. Okay, so this is our first one, -3. If one of the factors is negative, use negative counter. So one of the factors is negative, so we have to say it's negative. Step 2, add groups of counters to equal the second factor, also called the multiplier. Okay, so this is the multiplier, and it says we've got our 3, but then we need 4 of those -3. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 sections there. Step 3, count the counters to determine the product. How many counters are there in step 2? Well, there's 12. But remember, we are using negative counters, so our answer is -12. So if both factors are negative, then we would have used positive counters for the model. It just depends. Okay, so now look at the bottom section where it says draw a model of -2 times 4. So what they did was they said we're multiplying a negative and a positive, so that's a negative. Anytime you multiply a negative and a positive, it's going to be a negative. So just remember to think about that slice of pizza, so you can kind of tell I've got a negative and a positive. What's left? It's going to be a negative. So that's kind of how you can look at it. -2, here's 2, and I'm going to be multiplying by 4. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 groups. There are 8 negative counters, so the product of -2 times 4 equals -8. We're going to our next page, and we're going to be looking at some different things here as well. So I have 2 times -2. Since one of my numbers is a negative and I'm multiplying, the answer has to be a negative. So I already know I'm going to have a negative answer. Okay? Step 1, I'm going to put my 2 negative counters down, and then I'm going to have to put 2 more down. So I've got the 2 added there. So there are 2 negative counters. The product of 2 times the -2 equals -4. Next, -1 times 3. So since I am multiplying a negative and a positive together, I know my answer is going to be a negative. Step 1, I have 1 negative counter, and then I have to make sure there are 3 of those sections. There are 3 negative counters. The product of -1 times that +3 is -3. Because I'm multiplying a positive and a negative, I get a negative. So this is just like regular multiplication. The only thing you have to consider is if you have a negative and a positive, it's negative for your answer. If you have a negative and a negative, it's a positive. Okay, negative 3 times negative 2. So my answer is going to be positive, so I'm going to use positive counters, okay? I've got 3. Here's my first number. There's the 3. And then I have 2 different groups of those here. So there are 6 total. There are 6 positive counters. The product of negative 3 times negative 2 is 6. Okay, next problem. 5 times negative 2. I have a positive and a negative. If you multiply a positive times a negative, you are going to get a negative. So I'm going to count my 5 across first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we need to look at these. I've got 2 groups of 5. There are 10 negative counters. The product of 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Okay, 3 times 3. Those are positives. I'm multiplying a positive times a positive. I am going to get a positive. No negatives here. So I've got my 3 to start with, and notice I have to have 3 groups of those. I have 1, 2, 3 groups of those. There are 9 positive counters, so the product of 3 times 3 equals 9. Make sure that you go back, and I want you guys to look at these. And if you are looking at negative counters, I want you to make sure that you color all of your negative counters red. It's just going to look a little bit nicer for you, and it will be something that will help you to kind of understand what you're doing a little bit better. So make sure that you do that for me. All of your negative counters should be red. And then I want you to go back and look at your positive counters, and those are going to be yellow. So anytime you're doing a paper for me that you're going to turn in, or you're going to be doing journaling, your positive counters are going to be yellow, and your negative counters are going to be red. Okay, next page. So this time it says, oops, sorry about that. Okay. Having trouble reading the top of that page. We're going to start at 0, but I can't read much else. Let's see if I can figure out what this is. Okay, so we've got 2 integers with different signs. That's what we're doing. So 2 integers with different signs. I can, or I know how to, represent integer multiplication with models. And that's basically what we were doing. We were modeling multiplication. You start at 0 with your number lines, and then you raise the length of the second number based on the first number. So the direction of the raise is to the left. Think of it as walking toward the negative product. The tips of your shoes would point to the left. So they show you a negative 2 here. You're going negatively 2, but then you have to go an additional 2. So that would give you the negative 4. 2 integers with the same sign. Start at 0, and you raise the length of the second number based on the first number. For 2 positives, the direction of the raise is right. For 2 negatives, the direction is left toward the 0. Okay, so you go left for your negatives, and you go right for your positives. So this would be, I have a negative 2, and I have another times a negative 2. So that would be, my answer would be a positive 4. And they're showing you are really starting at the 0, but you draw your raise out from that 2 to there and the 4 to that 2. So we go twice. Look at your practice. Write a multiplication number sentence based on the model. So I have negative 2 times 1. And that equals negative 2. So see, they only went 1 space, but they went the 1 space twice to the left. And here you can see they have 2 times 2 equals the 4, and they go 2 spaces, and then they go an additional 2 spaces to end up with 4. Okay, let's look at our next one. We have these lines, negative 2 times 3. So I know I'm going to get negative 6 for my answer because I have a negative and a positive, and that's going to equal negative 6. So you can see where they went 3 spaces over negative to the negative 6. So we went 3 spaces over 2 times. On the next one, I have a negative 3 times a negative 3. A negative and a negative is a positive. So that's going to give me a positive 9. But you still work backwards because you have two numbers and it looks like this. You're going to go, okay, so there's the negative 3, the negative 3, and the negative 3. You have that negative 3, 3 different sections of it, but 3 times 3 is really 9. Negative 3 times negative 3 would be a positive 9. Okay, next one, negative 5 times 1. Because I have a negative and a positive, my answer is going to be a negative. So I'm going to go start at the 0 like it tells you to do. You always start at your 0 here, and you're going to go all the way to the negative 5. 2 times the negative 4. Okay, I have a positive 2 and a negative 4, so my answer is going to be negative 8. When I multiply 2 times 4, I get 8, but it's a negative 8. Okay, so again, we have the chunks of 4, and they're twice because it says 2. Next, I have negative 2, and I have a negative 3. So I'm multiplying a negative times a negative. I definitely get a positive with that. Positive 6. 2 times 3 is 6. So you can see where we're going backwards like this, but they're chunks of 3 on the number line. Negative 1 times 7. A negative times a positive is a negative. So I'm going to start at the 0 and go all the way to that negative 7. Okay, I can, or I know how to, represent integer division with models using integer counters. So we're going to look at negative 2 times 2 on the number line. Since I have a negative 2 and a positive 2, that's going to give me a negative 4 for my answer because I have a positive and a negative that I am multiplying together. So basically what you're looking at is going backwards from the 0. We have 2, but then we have to go 2 more, and that's negative 4. Okay, step 1 of negative 6, and now we're going to be looking at this division, dividing by 3. Basically the same rules are for this. They're going to work the same way because remember, multiplication and division are inversely related. Step 1, count out the proper number of counters based on the first number, also called the dividend. Okay, so I've got negative 6 and I'm dividing by 3. I have a negative and a positive, so my answer is going to be a negative. So I have 6 of these counters here. If one of the numbers is negative, use negative counters. We just said that. Step 2, group the counters based on the second number. The second number is a 3, so we have to group them by 3. That's also called the divisor. Step 3, count the number of groups to determine the quotient. How many groups are in step 2? Well, there's 2. So what is the quotient of negative 6 divided by 3? Negative 2. Draw a model of negative 8 divided by 2. Again, I have a negative and a positive, so my answer is going to be a negative. Negative 8. That means I have to have 8 different negative counters. Remember, I want you guys to go in and I want you to make sure that if they're negatives, you're going to make sure that they are red. So I have 8 of them here, and then we're going to section them off into groups of 2 because this says 2, right? So I have 1, 2, 3. I have 4 different groups of those. So there are 4 groups of 2. So the quotient of negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Cut the shoes to size in squares. Use them to indicate the direction of rays in completed models, and then record the quotients. Some of you are going to be cutting and pasting if you're at school, and some of you guys are just going to be watching and you're not going to be doing it that way, and that's totally fine. You're just going to learn this way. So I have a negative 20 and I'm dividing by 5. So negative 20 divided by 5 equals negative 4. I know because 20 divided by 5 is 4, and you have to make it a negative because you're dividing with one negative and one positive. That makes everything negative. And you can see that we went this direction because it's negative. We went to the left and we divided it into chunks of 5, and there were 4 different sections. Okay, next, negative 9 divided by negative 3. Okay, again, I have a negative and a negative. That makes a positive. So you can see the shoes are going to the right because it's a positive number. I've got 3 groups with this, and you can see how the shoes are sectioned off here. There's one, and there's one. And you can kind of see that there are three different sections to this, 3, 6, and 9. All right, negative 18 divided by 6. Negative 18 divided by 6. So when I look at this, I notice I have a negative and a positive. Well, that's definitely going to give me a negative number. And I know that 18 divided by 6 is 3, but it has to be a negative 3. Okay, so look at your choices, or look at your shoes here, and you're going from 0 to 6 because this 6 is my second number, so that's what I'm going to be looking at going on to the number line is 6 at a time. And I have a group of 6, another group of 6, and another group of 6 until I get to that negative 18, and there are 3 chunks of that. Okay, 8 divided by negative 4. Has to be a negative because I have a positive and a negative and I'm dividing. So my rule says if I'm dividing with a positive and a negative, it's a negative number. 8 divided by 4 is 2, so this is a negative 2 because of that negative on that 4. Okay, again, I have to group them by groups of 4, and you can see there are 4 in each one of those, and they are going to be negative. They're going to the left. You can see that. They're going to the left instead of the right. Okay, look at the bottom one. I have negative 15 divided by negative 5 is a 3. So here is my negative 15 right here. And here is where it ended up. Here at the 0 is where it shows. So I have negative 15 divided by the negative 5 gives me 3 is what I'm looking at. 15 divided by 5 is 3. A negative and a negative is going to end up being a positive is what that's going to be. Okay, let's look at our next section. Okay. I can represent integer division with models using integer counters. I know how to represent integer division with models using integer counters. So model negative 2 times 2 using a number line. So basically you're looking at, it's going to have to be a negative number. You know that you're looking at negative and a positive, so negative 2 times a positive 2 is going to end up being a negative 4 is where you're going to end up on your number line. So go ahead and draw that out there. Let's look at these again too. I want you to make sure if they are negatives, you guys are making sure that they are red, okay? And if they are positive, make sure that you guys are having them drawn in as yellow. All right. Step 1, count out the proper number of counters based on the first number. It's also called the dividend. So our first number is negative 6, so my counters are negative, and I've got 6 of them. I'm dividing them up into groups of 3. Step 2, group counters based on the second number, also called the divisor. So this is one group, and this is another group of 3. So you end up with 2 groups of your negative 3. So there's 2 groups. I can see that. How many groups are in step 2? 2. What is the quotient of negative 6 divided by 3? It's negative 2. So if both factors are negative, use positive counters for the model. But in this case, we had one negative and one positive. Okay, draw a model of negative 8 divided by 2. So here's negative 8. There's 8 counters, and they're in groups of 2. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8. And then we're going to circle the 2, just like they did. And I end up with negative 4. So there are 4 groups of 2. The quotient of negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Okay, so this is what you're going to do. You're going to, if you're at school, you're actually going to be cutting these apart and putting them where they're supposed to be. And this is actually all of the answers. So you're going to know what to do in your books or in your journals. If you're at home watching, this is a perfect opportunity for you to practice, okay? -8 divided by, -10 rather, divided by 5. I have a negative and a positive, so I know my answer is going to be negative. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. Okay? 12 divided by -4. Again, I have a negative in the mix, so one negative, one positive, it's negative. 12 divided by 4 is 3. And then -9 divided by -3. That's going to end up being a positive number because I have a negative and a negative. So -9 divided by 3 is positive 3. Okay, now look at the next sections. Basically, all they're doing is they're wanting you to see if the counters are negative or if they're positive and making sure that you have the right amount of them, okay? So since there's a 5, I need 5 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I do. 5 times 2 is 10. That looks perfect. Okay, I need to have 4 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, and it needs to add up to 12, and it does because 4 times 3 is 12. This one says I have 3 groups, 1, 2, 3. That's perfect, and those are definitely positive counters. Next, what they did was they just grouped them. They grouped 5 together here and got an answer of 2, which we were right. And it has to be -2 because I have a negative and a positive. Here, they grouped them together, all of these 4 like this, and I have 3 of those. And so the quotient is -3, which is what we said it was. The next section, it says we're going to put 3 together like this, and I have 3 groups of 3, so the quotient is 3. Make sure that if you are working on paper, that you color your counters red if they are negative, and that you color your counters yellow if they are positive, okay? All right, guys, let's see. I think that's it. You guys have done an amazing job staying with me. I hope this helps you to prepare for your journaling for the week. You might do this all in one day, or you may end up doing this at separate times. It will all be on the same video. Thank you, guys. Bye.